Okay, hello everybody. I am Ivan Tosic, and I will share my screen to introduce the session. Here we are. I hope you see now my screen. This is Leave No One Behind, dealing with priority neighborhoods session in the next 1 hour, and hope you are many listeners in this session. The structure of the session is quite simple. I will give a 5 minutes overview about deprived neighborhoods or priority neighborhoods. You will understand how these two terms are coming together. Then in the first half hour of the session, we will link to the community lab transfer network, where the case of Lille will be presented in details, and then the lead partner or good practice case Lisbon will give reactions to the Lille presentation. And the second half of the session, it will be the urban regeneration mixed transfer networks. Again, the emphasis will be on the case of Birmingham, one of the partner cities, and then the lead partner will give remarks. Now, if we talk about deprived neighborhoods, we have to understand that deprived neighborhoods exist in all cities, in almost all cities. There are very few cities where I went to in my life, and people said we don't have deprived neighborhoods at all. And in fact, it is fluctuating how deprived neighborhoods are. It depends on the economic development of the city. Obviously, after 2008, 2009, deprived areas became even more deprived. It also depends on the welfare policies on the national level, to what extent they allow people become poor. But it also depends on the processes causing spatial segregation, because deprived neighborhoods mean that poor people are coming together in a spatial concentration. I just selected 3 pictures showing one deprived neighborhood in the inner city of Budapest, which is a typical old inner city neighborhood. One on a housing estate. This picture was taken in Košice in Slovakia, and one on the peripheral areas of cities. This is a ghetto area in Sofia, Bulgaria. But I could have taken housing estate pictures from Naples. I could have taken deprived neighborhood inner city areas from many other cities. So these are just examples how different these deprived neighborhoods are. It is not easy task to fight deprivation. If you don't understand the reasons and the processes why deprived neighborhoods come into being, then you can easily miss the target. And I just mentioned here 3 contradictory interventions. Sometimes relatively poor areas in the city, relatively good quality housing is demolished, and the people are pushed out to other areas just because bringing in middle-class people into the city. Another typical mistake is to improve the buildings and just believe that the original residents will come back. Sometimes the costs are getting higher in the improved buildings, and the original residents cannot come back. So this is a kind of gentrification. And then it is also a typical mistake when there are deprived neighborhoods in the city which are very much needed in the city, and they are demolished. If the transitory areas are rebuilt in a city. Now, URBACT is dealing mostly with area-based policies, so directly dealing with places which have specific problems. And the belief in this strategy is that if we improve the places, then also the life of the people who are living in these places will improve. Obviously, there are also people-based policies possible where we don't focus on specific places, but we try to improve the living conditions of people, and then we believe that also the places will be improved where they are living. If we intervene into the places in areas in deprived neighborhoods, then it can be soft or hard interventions. you have a list of potential interventions here. Usually the hard measures are understood as physical urban regeneration. Usually they are much more applied than the soft measures. Now, deprived areas were addressed from the beginning on in URBACT. In fact, URBACT program was coming out from the urban community initiative, and URBACT initially was a program for those cities who applied urban and just to have exchange of information. And there were many innovative approaches in the last 3 waves of URBACT. One of the innovation is to call deprived neighborhoods now as priority neighborhoods, not to stigmatize those people who are living in the deprived neighborhoods. But there are also other issues like activating residents through small grants, or dynamize the relationship between the municipality and the neighborhoods using the mediators. So there are many innovations in this regard. In this session, we will have 2 examples. We will see how the good practice of Lisbon has been transferred to Lille. Lille will tell their examples, and then Lisbon will comment it. And then we will then see how the good practice of Łódź has been transferred to Birmingham. Again, Birmingham will tell its story, and then Łódź will comment it. In fact, the Lille and Birmingham are cases where the original good practice has been applied in a very different way, adapting it to the specific circumstances of their city. So this is the power of transformation, that you can really adapt it to your circumstances. Now, this was my presentation, very, very short, obviously, and I would like now to ask Lille. So please, Leah, share your experiences and show what you did with the good practice of Lisbon.
You see, okay. It seems that now we can see my screen.
Yes, we can. It is not full screen, but it is okay.
It's not full screen? Okay.
No.
So maybe would you share it in, if you could, in full screen?
Yes, Leah, I will help you. I will share it for you, Leah. Of course.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I can start without the screen. So hello to everybody. So on French urban policy to start with, to remind you that it was created in the late 70s, and even if the name changes in different periods, some principles remain. First, it's area-based. Then it's integrated. It has always been conceived to be shared between the national state and the local authorities. And third principle, the participation of the inhabitants has always been looked for. So nowadays in Lille Metropole, we have 26 priority neighborhoods among 95 municipalities. It concerns 1 into 6 inhabitants, so it's 200 inhabitants, 200,000 inhabitants, sorry. And so our urban policy is ruled by a city contract that was signed between more than 50 partners in 2015. And we have an annual call for proposal that covers different fields of public policies, such as economic development, education, sports, culture, and the living conditions, and so on. And every year, there are more than 1,000 projects that are funded through this annual call for proposal, and it's worth more than 40 million euros. Now we can, if you would like, share a small video we did for this urban network that explains the beginning of our reflection towards Lisbon's good practice. It's a good occasion for you to see my colleague Valentin Mouzin, who I was working with and couldn't join today. So Lisbon's good practice, the BIP-ZIP strategy, but Miguel is here, so he will tell you more about it. It's an integrated strategy, but it was simplified for the needs of the URBACT network into 4 tools. So one of the first tool was a mapping system that provides a mapping of the deprived areas, then a funding program, and the 2 other tools they are really interesting, but I won't talk about. We decided to focus quite quickly on what's called the BIP-ZIP program, which is a funding. Can you please go on the next slide, Romain? Thank you. So our experimentation, we decided to focus on the BIP-ZIP program and the funding program, because eventually we were not sure we could improve our big call for proposal, but we wanted to test something different, because when we were in Lisbon for the kickoff meeting, we were really impressed by what Lisbon did. First of all, their ability to fund projects in many fields of public policies and have no set scenes. Second, the short-term autonomy from subsidies for some projects that we visited, and it was really impressive too. And then the participation of inhabitants that were not the usual suspects of urban policy. For example, they had some projects, and one of the stakeholders was called Young People of the Neighborhood. So this participation of informal group of inhabitants, not the usual suspects, was seen as really interesting, and we triggered by this. So at the end, we decided to experiment on small scale in order to implement some of Lisbon's principle, maybe in our main call for proposal, the 40 million call for proposal I was talking about. And some of the principles, we did not know how we could do this, but we were really sure that we want to keep two. The first one was the fact that there was no settled themes. So Miguel, of course, you'll tell us more about it, but the fact that Lisbon, the city of Lisbon didn't say, I think the problem of your neighborhoods are this, and this, and please submit some projects regarding those problems, but what do you think are the problems of your neighborhood, and what can you do against it? So we want that seemed really interesting. And the second one was the fact that Lisbon asks for 2 entities to answer the call for proposal, not a single entity. And we were thinking that it was really, really interesting, because what we face is a competition toward resources, toward financial resources, and maybe it didn't help to create a good relationship between the stakeholder in the neighborhoods. So that's what on the point we wanted to experiment. And so by the time we were setting our project, Lille Métropole was designated to be a World Capital of Design 2020. So the World Design Capital is an event that showcases and Lille's candidacy and Lille's event was proposed to see how design could help the transition in a post-industrial area and to showcase some social innovation. So we decided to take this opportunity, and it met really with the philosophy of the community lab, and it also gave us the to have a design expert, François Gégou, who is also a well-known URBACT lead expert. And it gave us a fresh look, and one of the point of this fresh look, that maybe call for proposal itself was not the right tool. So it allowed us to think out of the box and say, okay, we were really, our mind was really set on a call for proposal, but maybe we can try another way to work with in the neighborhoods. So then a few words about the calendar. So we were really thinking we could do this in 2020, but it was a poorly chosen year, of course. And we only started our experimentation in October 2020. So it was quite late, and we are quite late on our schedule, but it's okay because and even if the community lab is over, the dynamic is still going on, so it's really interesting. And now we are only in the middle of the experimentation now. Now a few words on the experimentation itself. So now some workshops are taking place in the neighborhood. Their goal is to provide help inhabitants or small organizations that have projects but are not able to put it on the paper. So the proposition is made to have 9 different workshops on 3 themes that provide 3 needs identified during the whole process. The first need is to identify, to enhance visibility of the project, because first of all, and it was really interesting during the pandemic crisis and the lockdown and so on, there is a social reality, there is a public space reality, and there is an online space reality. And sometimes the authorities don't know anything about what's going on, and which is really visible online, and the other way around. So the idea to identify who is really willing to do something for the neighborhood, who is already doing something, and to put people together. The second one is to listen and to ignite, and really to help people know the other ideas, know how to formalize the ideas. And the third kind of workshops are to accompany in the formalization of idea into real projects. So at the end of the summer, in this autumn, more likely, we are going to choose some projects that are going to be helped financially, and they are going to be chosen with all our ULG partners and some of the peers in the neighborhood. We are not quite sure about the criteria of. We are in the middle of choosing them. But what we are sure is that we are going to choose the principle with an oral presentation and not a written administrative paper file. So that's one of the things we are sure. So
can you please round up the presentation, because we are out of time? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, just to say that we went quite far from Lisbon's experimentation, but we couldn't have. Now I leave the floor to Miguel.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, so Miguel, are you happy that your ideas from Lisbon has really started an innovative thinking in Lille? And how do you see this innovative application of your ideas? And can you have any feedback from this for your own good practice?
Yes, thank you, Ivan. Yes, it was quite a journey from the beginning, and it's interesting because I think the change of a word here on our network, it's kind of a baseline to comprehend this interaction between the good practice itself as a starting point and the learning process within the network. So more than transfer the good practice, we were sharing experience supported by that good practice. And what Lille accomplished here and what the other partners of the Community Lab network accomplished were very interesting and very interactive. And Lisbon itself has learned a lot from this sharing process with Lille and the other partners. I have here 3-4 slides just to pinpoint some key ideas of that I think it's interesting to put on the table regarding Lille as a partner, because we are talking about Lille Metropole, not a municipality, but an urban area of municipalities. And that's quite a challenge for imagine to make this transference or this sharing of this good practice. I will try to share now some slides at this moment. I don't know if you are seeing it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this we are starting off the middle of the slides, but that's okay. Let me see if I can switch it. Sorry. Okay. So some challenge from Lille point of view, this huge urban context, how to handle that. They have a quite interesting work on mapping priority interventions on this big area. We learn a lot on that, and how to make this link between policymakers and policies with local needs, with the local communities, and how to do it in a way that you can understand, you can make, you can test, you can have some kind of error proximity, because you are not going to be on point every time. And how can you measure that and make a cycle of learning from place to place, from project to project, from community to community in this vast urban area. So I think Lille have a great approach. They have to think a lot how to do it. It was not easy for them, but I think that making this local approach with the in this global context was the right choice, and to go with this this tool, the grant tool from BIPZIP program was very effectively done by them in a small scale to approach in a small scale to scale up in time. Also, what programs, what local projects, how to involve citizens' participation, how to ignite the community and NGOs. And I think also Leah has and Valentin and all the team of Lille has done a great job, because they didn't copy the principles. They apply the principles and they innovate. So they felt that was important in their local scale to make a soft approach before to open a grant, before to make a call, before to open, and to make it like BIPZIP wants here in Lisbon, to make it almost face-to-face kind of approach with the community, with the NGOs. And the active principles of the grant of the BIBSI program are there: citizens' participation, cooperation between local communities and NGOs, to hear the people that normally are not heard, to go to places. So I think this is extremely well done. It's completely a soft measure, as you, Ivan, talked about in the beginning, and I think it's going to give us a lot of learnings from the future, not only to Lille, because we are thinking how to make the same approach here in Lisbon, in our real context right now.
Okay,
the other thing,
I have to interrupt you, because we have a very interesting question from Eddie Adams, and he was asking about this idea that there is a kind of shotgun wedding required, where at least two agencies have to work together to bid together for a fund, and he was asking about the experiences with this issue. Is it really creating a cooperation between these agencies?
Yes, from Lisbon experience, 10 years ago, we started. That was the fundamental principle. We want cooperation at local level and not competition. We were seeing competition from NGOs to each other, from the same targets, the same people. They were not cooperating. They were not interacting. So this program and other initiatives in BIBSIP were kind of setting a mode that's saying nobody comes alone. No NGO should work alone. And that we were talking about from one local partner, and she was saying to us, and that was very interesting, and that's the response to your question, that in the beginning, for them, it was a kind of a strange thing to do, to have other NGOs on a network to cooperate, to make the proper application, to make the project with others. And 10 years from now, we were just having a coffee these days. She was saying, nowadays, I cannot. The network is exploding, and in my head, it's impossible to think a local project without a network ecosystem.
This is fantastic.
It's real.
I would just ask Daniela, because Daniela raised the question in the chat whether any other cities have experiences with grants like these ones. And probably, Daniela, you have a few examples in your mind. So because no one was asking, no one was answering in the chat, and we have very little time. So
well, I would like to just raise, thanks Ivan, and thanks Leah and Miguel, and also it will be very interesting to also exchange with the presentation, our friends network that will be presenting after this. I think the interesting thing that I would like to share, having been the lead expert of this network that just finished, unfortunately, but I think what is interesting to share with everybody that is in the room, and please write in the chat also throughout the session, we can also further discuss, is the fact that most cities have some types of grants that are helping cultural local initiatives, social inclusion. So it's not that per se the grant in itself is something of unseen of, but what is interesting here is exactly what Leah was saying, is making sure it is opening the fact that it's the empowerment, it's an instrument to empower the local inhabitants, and this changes the mindset of the municipality. It's not a, let's say, paternalistic approach to which the city is just providing the funding and the services, but the city is enabling the local initiatives, the NGOs and so on, to take on responsibility in developing the projects, and also having somehow it's the BIBSIP grant, and also this is also what Lille is experimenting, is somehow something similar to a Kickstarter, a bit like a startup fund for social economy projects at local scale. And this is a very, very different shift at local level. And this is why you need cooperation and not competition between the NGOs at local level, because you need for these initiatives to be embedded in a network. This is what Lille did, but Magda is online now, and I'd be curious if Magda also would like to share something, as they have also grants. There are also from the chat, I know some of the initiatives that some of the cities that are experimenting and looking into new ways of grants. And I think this is a way forward in which the city really make a very big change on what is the mindset in which the local initiatives on the ground take action.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much. I think what we can take home from these examples is that the city might have ideas what to do in deprived neighborhoods, but sometimes the people of these neighborhoods know it better. So if you give them some opportunities to list the ideas and even to start small experiments with this amount of money, then maybe new solutions are popping up which the city wouldn't think about it. And then the second one is very important, that involve the NGOs and create opportunities for them to cooperate with each other instead of just competing for the same amount of money. So I think these two ideas, that the city gives the opportunity for local people to do something and think about, and creating cooperation instead of competition, or at least co-opetition, these I think are very important ideas. Thank you very much for this community lab network. Thank you, Lille. Thank you, Lisbon. And now we have to change to another network. This is the Urban Regeneration Mix Network. Here the good practice came from Łódź, but the first presentation will be about Birmingham, and Peter, who was the lead expert of this network, he will interpret the example of Birmingham, and then Sam Ewell will contribute. So the word is yours. What did Birmingham do as project partner city in Urban Regeneration Mix?
Thank you very much, Ivan. I'm going to try and badly replace Carolina, who was the coordinator of the project for Birmingham, but unfortunately her health does not allow it. And I'd like to introduce Sam, who's showing himself now on the video. He was the ULG coordinator, as well as the broker in this difficult area, as well as the creator of a social enterprise. So a magic person in a magic role, but he couldn't do it without the inhabitants. I'm going to try and share my screen. So leave no one behind. I think the title is perfectly straightforward. And as Ivan said, it's what's come to Birmingham from Łódź. Birmingham, in two words, is a question of understanding the big challenge, which is the business success and the capital funding, which we have higher up, and which is illustrated by the big picture. And then the situation on the other side, in the other side of the mirror, where some people suffer from extreme poverty. And this is the case, especially for some children and other groups in Birmingham. We're going to talk about an area which is around a reservoir, and where there is traditional old housing, council housing on the one hand, and on the other hand, there is new housing which is proposed for people who can afford it, as Birmingham needs a lot of housing as it's developing very, very strongly from the economic point of view. But how can it meet the needs of its growing population if these groups of people do not manage to mingle, do not manage to integrate one with the other? So we have the contrasting pictures here, which Carolina has put, which resemble the pictures of Ivan at the beginning, where you have two sides of the coin very, very clearly identified. I will spend a little bit more time here on the Łódź model. The model came from the inspiration of the revitalization of something called the Priest's Mill, which is a small post-industrial area very close to the center of Łódź. And there, the person who took this on developed a form of coordination of one-man orchestra who does all. And the city was at the same time confronted by a very, very high number of public apartments, public flats, which had to be revitalized in the center of the town. The city actually owns 45,000 of them, which is the highest number in Poland possible. And here, trying to use human skills, like the psychological approach and mediation approach, the city developed a team of area hosts and social lighthouse keepers who started working with people and who were finding out what was behind every closed door when they knocked on it, never knowing what would be there. The result of the lodge model has evolved to be influenced by other cities in the network. Obviously, we've still got the mediator as number one on the left-hand side, but we're also going in towards something which Sam recognizes very well, the local community organizer, somebody who activates, integrates, and works with the residents to try and go towards what we call an integrated neighborhood, but which is very close to what we called in this project weaving the city locally. It's a constant process of making links and bringing them together. But we also found out that there was another very, very interesting function, and this comes mainly from Toulouse, but not only, is this sort of area manager of areas which need specific attention. And then he can bring in, in the lodge version, he can bring in, as a representative of the residents and the institutions, ideas towards the people who are the decision makers. So as you can see on the three aspects, face-to-face, middle, and strategic management at the top. Sam, would you like to take this over now, orally? If you could put your mic on.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, fine, go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter, and it's great to be here. I think I'll just riff on a few of the things that were mentioned there and pick it up here. There's this slide that says, what would it look like to move from an extraordinary event to everyday participation? That question became our research question, and I think that question is a good door to walk through to talk about how we both were inspired by the Łódź model, but also found ways to make it our own. Because I think one of the takeaways that I'm hearing is that these models, they're meant to inspire, but often they're not pull off the shelf where you do exactly the same thing. You do the process. So those pictures that you're seeing, I think one thing that I would, just to put it on a timeline, is to say the regeneration in B16, our postcode, it's really become a kind of hot iron, and it's a kind of perfect storm. There is a physical asset, Edgbaston Reservoir, that there's a master plan on that, and that was the formal process that was led by the planning department, that we really have worked hard to try to build a bridge with that and to work with that formal process. But the event, if I just go back just before the timeline, this was 2018, we did an event and we called the event Eat, Make, Play. And that was really to big up community participation around this beautiful green public space. We did it again in 2019, repeat performance. I think there were between 400 and 500 people. And what happened was, at the second event, we asked people, what would you like to do from this? And where would we like to go? And the choir of residents, what we took away from that research was, you know, the things we've done at this annual event, we'd like to do more of that every day. You know, we've learned to sew, we've played music, we've expressed our culture, we've brought our food. So what would it look to do like that more of every day? Now, I think that you could draw a line between that and what was described as soft measures, but I think that's true. But I think one of the aspects that we noticed in this process is doing things together actually creates the conditions for a certain kind of collectivity, a certain kind of momentum for trust and for doing the next thing, which might be, you know, for example, taking community ownership over a building or something a bit more ambitious. But it was, yes, it was a community event, but it also prepared the way for kind of everyday participation. So I'll just mention Eat, Make, Play moved from being a annual event to a community-owned business. Peter, should I say a little bit about Eat, Make, Play and how that lines up with the mediation, that function, or?
Yeah, that would be fine, but I would like to stress that you talk about the edge effect.
Yes,
we've got
right.
Kate Raworth economy on the right-hand side at the bottom. And
Yeah.
I think the edge effect for me there is the relationship between what the needs of people are to what the planet can take. That's one edge.
Yeah.
But
That's
Edgbaston Reservoir is also on the edge between water and land. And the next slide is this one. So maybe you can pick things from here, which would be.
Yeah, so I think just to take Peter's comment, edge effect it's a way I've come to understand the work. I think I found myself in a kind of in URBACT language as the ULG coordinator. That's one hat I wore. I also found myself transitioning when the URBACT work began to becoming a accidental social entrepreneur. That's a term I just heard. I didn't, wake up in 2015 and think we're going to start a community business, but that was where the edge between capacity in the community and opportunity that needed to be tended. So that's what Eat, Make, Play provided. But there was also this hat of just quite literally being a community organizer. And one of the things that I noticed was at the micro neighborhood level, regeneration, one neighborhood just was literally being established on a brownfield site by the reservoir. That's called Port Loop, formerly brownfield. We need housing. I think it's fantastic. But this neighborhood, it's the built environment of the neighborhood created an edge, which was it's an island. It has a canal loop that separates it. And all the marketing around this new neighborhood was life on the island and come live on the island. And part of my role was to both, get to know and befriend the people that moved to the island, but also to let them know, hey, there's life outside the island, and your kids won't go to school on the island. You're not going to get your food on the island. There's life. So there's multiple edges, and edges if we try to mimic biology, we recognize that there's always the most diversity at edges. If you take water and land, you always have the most species at the edge. And in human ecology, these edges can be beneficial or harmful. They can be doors to new relationships and opportunities, or they can be walls that people can't get through. So at the neighborhood level, the work has been tending multiple edges between a new neighborhood and an existing neighborhood, between capacity of residents that hasn't been unlocked and opportunities to do things together. And then you're right, Peter, there's that, when you pan back from the neighborhood and you take a framework that we're going to use, like Kate Raworth donut economics, you recognize, if you're familiar with that we need things that are good for people and planet. We need enough for everyone, but without overshooting the limits of the planet. And that's a very ambitious, massive vision. And the next phase of our work is to downscale that donut model into the neighborhood, into B16.
Yeah. I think that maybe the most important lesson or experience coming out of this is in the second line here of the lessons learned, social and economic capital. I think that we've worked for tens of years on the economic capital and thinking that growth is the only thing which is important. But if we leave behind, the cities become destabilized, the countryside becomes destabilized, and we need to be able to work on the link between the social and economic. And that's exactly what Eat, Make, Play, the social enterprise that you are co-heading, is trying to do, and is trying to do in such an exciting way. I think also it's very important to see that to steer away from grant dependency, the previous phase, grant dependency, how actions that will help people to do things without grants. And here the experience of Eat, Make, Play was very important during the COVID crisis, where you just started producing food, collected somewhere else to people who had lost their jobs, and so on and so forth. So it was an incredible experience of grant independency, in my opinion. And finally, the new skill sets which are needed to be unlocked in local authorities. We'll be talking about that later with the tree of inspiration that the project has developed, but it has to be linked to innovation, more risk-taking, and a little bit of culture of failure.
Yeah. Peter, could I just add one thing to that? It's been great to work with you, and for you to kind of not be a fish in the bowl, but know enough about what the water's like in the bowl to help us and to respond. I think one metaphor that you used, or a kind of analogy, is energy. And I think that's right. We do need to harness those multiple forms of capital and to see them as kinds of energy, just to take the shift. We do need money, we do need finance, but there's different kinds of energy in a community. And I think what the lesson is about, it's not so much is the energy there, but how do we capture it? And just to give you the example, as a gardener, during COVID, we've done a lot of community gardening, and we've built in water capture systems. So guttering that captures water into these 1,000-liter IBC tanks. Now, the water was already there. We just weren't capturing it. And so Eat, Make, Play is one place where the social and economic capital is being captured. Civic Square is another one. Incredible Surplus. I could list lots of organizations. So I think for me, one of the lessons that I've observed is to trust that most of what we need is in our neighborhoods. And even if you think about money, we're always spending money, but so much of what we need is leaking out. We're just spending it on long chains. And so Eat, Make, Play is one example, but to find ways to capture social, ecological, and economic capital as forms of energy and to keep them in the neighborhood, that connects back to that point about early wins. But also, if we think about, there's a book I'm reading now called Emergent Strategy. I'll just type it later in the text, Emergent Strategy, but it's all around, it's not just glorifying small and saying, oh, we just need small, but it is recognizing that there's patterns in nature and in humans where the small complex interactions have an impact that emerges and makes possible. If we hadn't had Eat, Make, Play, we wouldn't have been able to do the share library. If we hadn't had the share library, local schools wouldn't have invested in and buy our products. And so it's the emergence of what happens through our small actions is also.
So thank you very much. I think Sam, you were the community connector in this project, and now I'm asking Joanna, because Joanna is representing the lead partner WUJ. So how were you surprised to see that Birmingham made something a bit different, a twist on your original good practice, and what could you learn from Birmingham?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so no, not at all. I'm not surprised. We were inspired by them, and no less, I think, than they, I hope, were inspired by what we did in WUJ. Birmingham, we met with people from Birmingham already in the first phase, so we know what they were capable of. And as some of you may have already heard, and those of you who are in the transfer networks, this is not a one-way street. And we definitely learn from each other mutually along the whole way. And it has been a journey for us in WUJ as well. I think that they brilliantly capitalized on our good practice, the URBACT good practice that we show initially, the core of which is the mediation, we introduced starting this large-scale urban regeneration process in Łódź, in the historic city center, which we facilitated, hiring a team of mediators, those lighthouse keepers and area hosts, who were to provide up-to-date information for our residents and support them during the whole process, mainly in the process of relocation to another flat for the time of investment. And what they did in Birmingham inspired us as well, because as Piotr mentioned in his presentation as well, we in a sense modified the role of our mediator in Łódź. We started as lighthouse keepers, but then we, seeing what Birmingham achieved in their neighborhood, we decided to, let's say, add some competences and empower our mediator to become a local community organizer. So not only a person who simply provides complex assistance to a resident in need, like helping them with bureaucracy or looking for another accommodation, but we wanted to bring people together, to integrate the local community, to focus on an idea, on a concept, on inspiring, on invigorating, on gathering this potential of a local neighborhood, so that people started to work together. So our mediator, or during the course of the project, turned to be the local community organizer who initiated joint activities, similarly to what Sam did in Edgbaston Reservoir. Of course, it was easier for us being city employees, still unusual, probably a bit extraordinary civil servants. But I hope that after Urban Regeneration Mix Transfer Network project finishes, we plan to, using this gardening metaphor that Samuel used in his presentation, I hope that we managed to plant the seed in our ULG, in the neighborhood that we worked with, and that we left there a local leader, a leader figure who will carry on the activities that we started during this 2-year journey with them.
Okay. We are now coming close to the end of this session. We still have 6 minutes. What I would like to emphasize is that in the earlier wave of deprived neighborhood projects, the usual way of working was that the first task was to prepare a plan for the deprived neighborhood. And then we were talking about integrated plans, which means that you have to integrate economic, social, and environmental issues. Then the plan was approved by some authorities. Then the EU money arrived, and sometimes national money arrived. And then the project started to be developed. And in fact, I was really astonished by projects in Budapest and in other cities when in the initial phase, some people participated and they gave their ideas, etc. But after the project was approved, participation was over because the task was to spend the money as soon as possible. And in fact, the more EU money arrived, the less participation was. So in my hope is that these methods, what we have shown in this short session, I mean the small grants, the cooperation between NGOs, the community connector role, to believe in the social bond between people and to believe that people know what would be the best for themselves, but they are shy at the beginning to tell it. So let's create opportunities to that they express themselves. This will bring around a new wave of development in priority neighborhoods. Even if the money will be less probably from EU side, the development can be more because this money will be spent much better. Now we still have a few minutes, so it is now open to anyone. If you want to make remarks, it can be Peter, it can be even the other project. So please have your last words.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Ivan, that I think that the new Bauhaus initiative, which the president of the EU Commission has launched, is something very interesting because it has no content apart from a certain number of principles, such as aesthetics, beauty, happiness, etc. And it is wanting to fill the content, and it's going to do experimental things in a very interesting way. it's the first time I've seen something as open as that being proposed by the Commission, and I think it's something that we should all look at from a very interesting point of view. My second point is that I had the privilege to be the coordinator of regeneration in Gdynia in northern Poland. I had no European money and a direct contact with the vice mayor. And this allowed for participation, this allowed for inhabitants' time. It did not oblige me to put the building works into action 6 months later or anything of this sort. So I think you're absolutely right to say that we have to have a period before we actually go into refurbishing buildings, which allows for what Sam was talking about. In other words, this energy management, this collecting of social capital and masticating it so that it becomes real and virile. And then I think the local authorities could be more efficient, but they will have in front of them people who know what they want. That's maybe the thing we should tell them about, that people will know what they want.
Yeah, we have a very interesting question from Peter Austin from Oslo. To what extent is EU money being used to build up competency at the local level for inspiring and coordinating this kind of work? So how can you build competency among the normal residents that they should be able to coordinate? What is the link between local knowledge, local interests, and competency to perform a project?
Sam, do you want to go on that one?
Yeah, well, when Yvonne paraphrased it, immediately I was thinking residents have local knowledge. That's a kind of intuitive competence. It's a knowledge of place. It's a knowledge of, the cultural memory and how things have worked in that place. Competence. I mean, I do think, just to go back to my ed, the ecology of a city council like Birmingham, to take an example, is it's difficult often for residents. It's just a very different organizational culture and process. Locally, neighbors know things. They share things informally. There's just a different kind of associational life. Where in a council, planning tends to be unilateral. It's just a different way of making decisions. So I think I would like to see, as a resident, I would like to see the resource in the council for people to be able to do some deep listening to residents, because I think the local knowledge of residents needs to be heard and accessed. And yes, if there could be some resource to residents through small grants or other ways to just experiment doing things with their local knowledge, that would also be a win.
We have 1 more minute. One thing that I would just like to add onto what Samuel and the others were saying. I totally agree. For capacity building at local level initiatives, the new European Bauhaus is an opportunity for filling in a very big box of content and opportunities. So I think everybody also that is listening today should take the opportunity, because it's an empty box. So it's up to us to fill it out. But if we're looking into real funding, like real big money, or relatively big money, so to say, I think what we really need to start looking into, and this is also why we shared the link of the work of the local pact. That was a work that with Ivan and the cities that were here presenting today, we've been carrying out, because it is important to be using the funding for those countries like Italy or Spain that have important money for recovery fund. It's important to use that money as well, but that we know is a loan. It's short term, but we still have normal European funding, and especially PO5 is an important opportunity for implementing funding. So this is where we have to make sure that we combine the capacity building that we do at local level with the NGOs and so on, with the more streamlined, larger funding and investment that is being done on the ground. Because this is one of the risks that we have, is that we will be having all these very social innovation, very nice initiatives on the ground, and then we will be having the big funding that works on more traditional schemes. So this is something that we really have to be working on together.
Yeah, I totally agree with Daniela, And now this extraordinary funding is coming from the Recovery and Resilience Fund. And the danger is again there that this will be a totally top-down planned and top-down developed money. So we should really look at the normal cohesion fund where 8% of money will have to go to cities. And this is an opportunity where we can use this new type of thinking. I'm thanking very much to all the speakers. I hope that that everyone who was listening had some interesting examples. The session is now finished, and I would like to ask all of you to go to the poll place and evaluate this kind of session. And thank you very much. The festival is just at the beginning, and there will be many other interesting sessions like that. Thank you very much and goodbye.